This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, January 21st. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees, so our broadcast will look different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. The United States has a new president and vice president on Thursday, with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris both taking the oath of office at the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday, just 2 weeks after rioters stormed the hallowed halls of Congress. We'll recap all the festivities coming up shortly, but we begin in South Africa, where health experts are expressing doubt about how the government aims to vaccinate 40 million people in the absence of a finalized plan. Sisipo Sikweya has more.
South Africa says it wants to vaccinate 40 million people this year.
I don't think that target will be met.
But several healthcare experts like Jeremy Nell, head of the infectious disease division at Johannesburg's Helen Joseph Hospital, have their doubts. And they're urging the government to provide a plan.
When you just run the numbers and work out how often you have to be vaccinating people and how many doses you need to be giving per day, and the enormous infrastructure challenges and the logistics challenges, the absence of a finalized plan currently, and the fact that even far better resourced countries than us have struggled immensely.
3, 2, 1.
South Africa is by far Africa's worst hit in the COVID-19 pandemic. More than 1.3 million cases and over 37,000 deaths as of Monday.
15 minutes.
It's also grappling with a second wave of infections driven by a new variant. As Glenda Gray, president of the South African Medical Research Council, puts it, South Africa needs all hands on deck. On Tuesday, the government released a statement saying a national committee would oversee the vaccine rollout in both the public and private sectors. But it did not say when the rollout would start, how distribution and storage logistics would be managed, or identify private companies that would be involved. With a public health system creaking even before the pandemic hit, experts say a vaccination drive will require a plan to coordinate with the private sector. South Africa's biggest pharmacy chain, Clicks, is among those to offer its distribution network to help, but it said it's awaiting clarity from the government. Others, including South Africa's largest retailers, Shoprite, and the Minerals Council, a body representing the mining sector, said they are ready to support the rollout. Health experts say that's encouraging, but added that a detailed government blueprint was needed to avoid delays in distributing life-saving vaccines.
Sisipo Sikweya of Reuters filed that report. This week, the head of the World Health Organization warns the world is on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure over the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. This comes after some countries are already well underway with their vaccination campaigns, while others do not know when they will get their first shots. Here's VOA's Mariama Diallo.
As some countries ramp up vaccinations against COVID-19, the head of the World Health Organization warns the prospects for equitable vaccine distribution are at serious risk.
More than 39 million doses of vaccine have now been administered in at least 49 higher income countries. Just 25 doses have been given in one lowest income country. Not 25 million, not 25,000, just 25.
Speaking at the world's body annual executive board meeting in Geneva this week, Tedros Ghebreyesus said it's not right that younger, healthier adults in rich countries get vaccinated against COVID-19 before older people in poorer countries.
Not only does this me-first approach leave the world's poorest and most vulnerable people at risk, it's also self-defeating. Ultimately, these actions will only prolong the pandemic, prolong our pain. The restrictions needed to contain it, and human and economic suffering.
Global coronavirus cases have exceeded 96 million, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. The United States, India, Brazil, Russia, and Britain are the 5 most affected nations. Though some countries have been inoculating parts of their populations since December, African health authorities, for example, say it could be weeks, even months, until they get their first shots. With over 113,000 cases and more than 1,450 deaths, Nigerian Dr. Oluwajoba Orogi says cases are mounting every day, and he and his colleagues are feeling drained.
The cases will continue to rise if we don't have a vaccine to stem things, a vaccine to even produce, to give us some herd immunity. So that continues to mean more work stress, more mental stress, more stress on all the resources that I, as an individual, and the facility has to offer.
Also this week, President Joe Biden said he will reverse the decision to withdraw the United States from the World Health Organization and is sending American immunologist Anthony Fauci to the WHO Executive Board meeting this week to help develop an international COVID-19 response plan. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Nigerian authorities reopened schools across the country Monday despite a jump in confirmed cases of COVID-19. But while millions of students are excited to return to class, health authorities are urging caution. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
Linguistics student Esther Ajayi had just started her freshman year when COVID-19 hit last year and closed her Abuja school for months. Nigerian authorities allowed schools to reopen this week despite a rise in the number of coronavirus cases.
I feel happy resuming back to school because, to be sincere, it was boring staying at home. So, me resuming back to school today, I have the opportunity to meet some of my friends again.
Besides COVID-19, unresolved payment disputes between Nigerian authorities and teachers also delayed school resumption last year, but both parties reached an agreement in December. But not everyone is pleased about the schools reopening. Nigerian health unions say conditions are still too dangerous.
Then you are risking those kids, you're risking the teachers, you're risking the families, and at the end of the day, who are going to suffer is we, the health care providers. We are going to suffer. We have more work on our hands.
Many Abuja schools recorded low attendance this week, days after Nigeria reported its highest daily number of coronavirus infections, over 1,800 cases. School authorities are operating shorter hours and using social media platforms to send lesson notes to students. Every school is expected to create its own student-led COVID-19 task force and monitor students' compliance with measures to prevent the spread of the virus. Muhammad Buhari is the student union president at Zuba College of Education in Abuja.
So they will be in charge to enforce the law of COVID-19 protocol in every school. They will be the one going around to see how the students are doing in the campuses, because staying at home is doing us more harm.
While schools are staying open for now, authorities say they will monitor COVID-19 cases in coming weeks to see if they need to reconsider. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja.
A private school has opened in central Kenya for pregnant girls, teenage mothers, and their babies to ensure they get an education despite stigma. Kenya's teenage pregnancies have soared during the COVID-19 pandemic as schools were closed until this month. Here's Brenda Mulinya in Nairobi.
After 16-year-old Jacqueline, not her real name, got pregnant in August, like most young mothers, she almost dropped out of school until she found Serene Haven. Serene Haven School, Kenya's first private school for pregnant teenagers, teen mothers and their babies, opened its doors earlier this month.
When you're in a class with people who are the same, you're all the same, it's not hard. You're able to focus because everyone has the same challenge. So it's not hard, by the way, because you're sure your baby is fine with the match on here, and after a short while you'll be able to be with your child.
The students at Serene Haven either got pregnant or gave birth during last year's COVID-19 lockdown, when Kenya's teenage pregnancies surged by about 40%. In the school's nearest central sub-district alone, officials say the jump in teen pregnancies has been shocking.
In 2019, maybe 1 or 2 cases. But in 2020, we are talking about hundreds of cases. And you already know the reason.
Kenyan officials blame students not being in schools, which were allowed to reopen this month for the first time since March. Founder and director of Serene Haven, Liz Muriuki, says their goal is to ensure that teens get an education without stigma.
This school is filling a gap and a need that society had neglected for so long. Because when a girl gets pregnant, everybody is pointing at the girl.
Ruth Kirimi, a guardian of one of the students, says Serene Haven is also helping young mothers to recover their self-confidence.
They're picking up this child and telling them, hey, there's potential, you're good. Just this thing happened, we're giving you a second chance.
Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, Kenya was struggling to reduce teenage pregnancy. According to Save the Children's 2019 Global Childhood Report, Kenya has the third highest teen pregnancy rate in East Africa after Tanzania and Uganda. Brenda Molinya for VOA News, Nairobi.
Former Vice President Joe Biden became the 46th President of the United States Wednesday, taking the oath of office in an inauguration unlike any other in American history. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has this recap.
The President-elect of the United States.
The power of the U.S. presidency was peacefully transferred Wednesday amid unprecedented security.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
Democrat Joseph R. Biden, Barack Obama's former vice president, became the 46th president of the United States, standing on the steps of a building that was attacked exactly 2 weeks ago by supporters of former President Donald Trump. Biden sending a clear message about the assault and the efforts to overturn his election.
Democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed.
He then called on the country to move forward together.
Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured.
Biden assumes the presidency facing multiple crises, among them the coronavirus pandemic that has killed 400,000 Americans.
We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation.
He will be assisted by Vice President Kamala Harris.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
The first woman in U.S. history to hold that office, as well as the first woman of color and Indian American. Traditional inauguration festivities were muted for security reasons and also to observe pandemic safety protocols. Hundreds of flags decorated the National Mall where people would have stood. And a record 25,000 National Guard troops were on hand to prevent any further security breaches. Protests were limited.
The end is near.
In a first in modern presidential history, President Trump chose not to attend the ceremony or welcome his successor to the White House. Vice President Mike Pence taking his place instead. But Biden had a message to Trump's supporters.
Take a measure of me and my heart. If you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably.
Biden assumes the presidency backed by a Democratic-controlled U.S. Senate and House, a powerful partner in his first-term agenda to combat climate change, pass immigration reform, and to rebuild America's image abroad.
We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges.
The oldest person to ever assume the office of the president, Biden has planned out an intensive 10-day sprint to jumpstart his administration's agenda. That will include a renewed attempt to rebuild the American economy with a new round of coronavirus aid. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
President Joe Biden was sworn in on a heavily guarded stage outside the U.S. Capitol building that was attacked just 2 weeks earlier by pro-Trump rioters. The historic inauguration was mostly virtual, but VOA's Caroline Presutti was in the crowd and spoke with some who attended the historic inauguration in person.
You could hardly call it a crowd. The only trace of normalcy was a vendor or two. No stadium-sized monitors, no crush of cheering inauguration crowds. Just small groups of Americans interested in what was happening down the street.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
And the nation's future under President Biden.
I think he's got a huge mess to clean up.
Torres Addington survived COVID. Biden says his administration will vaccinate 100 million people in his first 100 days.
I'm not sure that he can do all that he promises, but I have hope that he will at least try. I have hope.
The new president is proposing a $1.9 trillion stimulus plan to jumpstart the economy weighed down by the pandemic. Frank Beal, a financial advisor from North Carolina, backs the move.
Inevitably, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so eventually it's all going to come, but right now there's enough stimulus to keep things kind of rocking.
On immigration, President Biden promptly sent Congress a proposed 8-year path to citizenship for an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants.
There are people who are feeding us right now, picking our crops, working our construction. Those are all immigrant jobs. And they will be building this country the same way that our country has been built by immigrants since day one.
I think he's going to give amnesty to people that broke the law. That's terrible for any country.
On climate change,
a cry for survival comes from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear.
Courtney Thomas welcomes Biden's rejoining of the Paris Climate Accord.
Considering that we're actually going to follow the scientists, absolutely. And facts, instead of hunches and how he feels, absolutely.
These 200,000 flags fly for Americans who couldn't attend because of the pandemic. Each of the states and territories is represented in unity.
Take a measure of me and my heart. If you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably.
Unprecedented security prompted by the Capitol riot concerns Roy Wendell, a Trump supporter.
We're inaugurating a new president, and we've got bunches of guys standing on the street with guns and razor wire behind them. That's like that's an other country thing. That's not the America that I feel that we should be.
Biden's biggest challenge starts right now, healing a nation from a viral pandemic and a pandemic of partisanship. Caroline Presutti, VOA News, Washington.
Many Africans listened and watched Wednesday's peaceful transfer of power in the United States on their radios and televisions, including Ibrahim Kane, a Senegalese human rights activist and political analyst. He told VOA's James Buddy that the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol building by supporters of former President Donald Trump left many in Africa with the conclusion that the U.S. could no longer lecture Africans about democracy. But Kane says President Joe Biden's inauguration speech and his faith in U.S. democratic institutions provided assurances that the Biden administration will do everything to also support and strengthen democracy and the rule of law in Africa. Kane says President Biden's announcement was reassuring for Africans because the continent felt abandoned during the Trump administration, as Africa was the only continent that Trump did not visit. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover during the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, before departing Washington, D.C. for Florida, former President Donald Trump had some final words for his supporters. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back to Africa 54. The now former President Donald Trump addressed a group of supporters before departing the Washington area for Florida on Wednesday morning, hours ahead of his successor's inauguration. VOA's Michelle Quinn has more on the final hours of Trump's four-year term.
Donald Trump left the White House and the nation's capital Wednesday morning as his successor, Joseph Biden, was preparing for his midday inauguration.
You are amazing people. This is a great, great country. It is my greatest honor and privilege to have been your president.
In keeping with his presidency, Trump, 74, broke with tradition and became the first president since 1869 to skip his successor's inauguration ceremony. After a short helicopter ride from the White House to Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, Trump took the stage to hail to the chief. A 21-gun salute sounded as he reached the podium. Trump has yet to concede the election to President Biden, falsely alleging widespread voter fraud. The former president will face an impeachment trial in the U.S. Senate for his words and actions leading up to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by pro-Trump supporters. Trump has condemned the violence and has defended his speech that day.
All Americans were horrified by the assault on our Capitol. Political violence is an attack on everything we cherish as Americans. It can never be tolerated.
Trump also indicated to his supporters that his time in politics is not over.
We will be back in some form.
Trump and the former First Lady, Melania Trump, traveled to Florida, where they are staying at his private club, Mar-a-Lago.
So, have a good life. We will see you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
After 4 years of hostility between the U.S. president and much of the news media, press advocates are hoping for a reset. VOA's press freedom editor Jessica Girit has more.
US journalists are working in an increasingly hostile environment, facing physical attacks and verbal assault from protesters and law enforcement, not to mention relentless verbal attacks by outgoing US President Donald Trump. The pro-Trump mob that assaulted the US Capitol smashed equipment of an Associated Press crew. They charged and yelled epithets at journalists, assaulted crews and scrawled "Murder the Media" on the building's doors. Over the past 4 years, pipe bombs were sent to CNN. A gunman killed 5 people in the Capital Gazette newsroom in Annapolis, and the government spied on journalists covering the migrant caravans at the southwest border.
It wasn't simply a matter of the president and his aides not liking coverage, which is normal, but they attacked true things in ways that were dangerous. and pose physical threats to journalists.
I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people. To anybody that would ask a nasty question like that, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people.
Trump and his supporters accused the media of treating him harshly and unfairly.
Coverage of any president, really any leader, is by definition not going to, most of the time, be complimentary. That's not usually what makes news. So the scrutiny that Donald Trump got is true. Of course, there was a lot of scrutiny, but that is the job of the press.
Critics say US support for press freedom has diminished on the international stage, where America has historically been a leader. One example is its widely criticised response to the killing of Washington Post correspondent Jamil Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia's Istanbul consulate. Suzanne Nossel of the human rights and free speech group PEN America spoke with VOA by phone.
In the case of Jamal Khashoggi, they made quite clear that they were not going to let this butchering of a journalist interfere with their relationship with the Saudi government.
She says organisations like hers lose leverage to free jailed journalists without support from the US government and its bilateral relations around the world. The State Department has applauded the courage and determination of independent media and in statements condemned politically motivated persecutions, impunity and attacks, and the threats levelled at female journalists. The White House also had some success, including ongoing efforts to free Austin Tice, an American freelancer missing in Syria since 2012. Incoming President Joe Biden says he will defend the rights of activists and journalists and work to restore relations with the media. But analysts say his press freedom record is less than ideal. The Obama-Biden administration saw tighter access to information, prosecution of sources, and seized journalists' phone records.
Those were very, very dangerous things and things that we weren't used to seeing in the U.S. either. And those happened during the Obama-Biden administration. So definitely those of us who advocate for press freedom and access to information are watching warily for what will happen during the Biden-Harris administration.
Advocates are pressing for toned-down rhetoric, more protections for media covering protests and unrest, and for the U.S. to stand up for press freedom. Again, Suzanne Nossel, CEO of PEN America.
The Biden administration needs to start speaking out on behalf of individual journalists around the world who are targeted.
As the US enters a new presidency, journalists and rights groups will be pushing for press freedom to be a priority. Jessica Jaree, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.